You know what pairs really nicely with this weather? Doppelbock. It's not a coincidence that we release this beer in the dead of winter every year. Doppelbock comes out this week. Pairs perfectly with this weather we're having. It's an 8% lager. It's historically the biggest German lager that there is. It's got some dark fruitiness, kind of raisin, fig, dark bread, but being a lager, it's still really clean and drinkable. I want to share with you a fun little story about Doppelbock, unique to this year. So back in mid-November, when we brewed Doppelbock, this beer takes quite a while to make, and we give it a long time to kind of hang out and mellow out in the cellar. We were brewing this in mid-November. I was pulling the early shift, and at about 4:30 in the morning, when it was time for me to set up, we'd already mashed in, or I had already mashed in. It was time to set up to harvest yeast to then later in the day pitch into the fermenter. And at about 4:30 in the morning, my heart like immediately stopped, because I knew when I went to the tank that I was supposed to be harvesting from that we had dumped that yeast a couple days prior. That had never happened in over 5 years of brewing here at Riggs, and it's a pretty major mistake. You can't make the beer without the yeast. So Lance, one of our newer brewers, came in at about 7, and we checked a whole bunch of tanks, and yeah, there just wasn't any good yeast that we could pull and use for this. So I went into like crisis mode, called some buddies from around the area to see who had a huge amount of lager yeast. Such a big beer requires a lot of yeast cells, and most breweries don't have that many lager yeast cells sitting around. But I knew of a brewery up in Chicago where the head brewer actually went to the brewing school in Germany that I went to, Doman's, and we'd never met in person, but we chatted a few times on like instant messenger, and I shot him a message and was like, hey, by any chance, do you have like 45 barrels at 20 million cells a milliliter worth of 3470 lager yeast? And he was like, yeah, actually, I've got some really fresh yeast that I don't need. When do you want to come and get it? So literally, the rest of the brewing crew came in like at 8 o'clock. Caroline and I hopped in the van, drove up to Chicago, met Andreas at Great Central Brewing Company, and we brought up a couple sanitized kegs, and we filled up a bunch of lager yeast and trucked it back down just in time to salvage the 20-hour brew day and pump that fresh yeast right into the beer. Or at that point it was unpitched wort that then became beer. Long story short, the beers turned out fantastic. They're obviously using the exact same yeast strain that we use, that 3470 lager yeast, and I'd like to take this opportunity to say Prost and vielen Dank to Andreas. I think the only other German brewmaster in the Midwest, maybe, at least in the state of Illinois, and he saved my ass. So thanks a lot to Andreas and to all the fine folks up at Great Central. If you're ever up in the Chicagoland area, go check them out. They've got a cool tap room up there and a really big brewery. Anyway, that's a fun little story about Doppelbock. One other thing I wanted to tell you guys, other than Doppelbock's available in cans and draft starting now, so go find it and help it keep you warm. The other thing I wanted to put out there was, over the next 2 weekends, like Thursday through Sunday, the next 2 upcoming weekends, we're going to bring back private tours. So in the past, we've done public tours where a whole bunch of random groups of people come together and take a tour. We're not quite ready to do that yet, but what we're going to do, at least for the next 2 weekends, is if you've got a group of between 10 and 16 people, you can email me directly. This is not normally how we do this. We usually have a thing on the website, but you know what? We're just we're going with the flow right now. It actually is working out because the snowstorm helped. It chopped half of our production week off. So we actually have room in the brewery. We're going to make some room, put some tables in, and hopefully bring a lot of people through the brewery for a 1-hour detailed technical tour and then a 1-hour guided tasting of everything we have on draft. It's a lot of fun. It's been like 2 years since we've been doing this, so we're excited to bring people back into the brewery. That's going to start up theoretically on Thursday, email me, matt@rigsbeer.com, matt@rigsbeer.com. And only do that if you've got a group between 10 and 16 people. And it's got to be like in your social circle. I don't want to be mixing a whole bunch of groups and doing that thing quite yet. But if these are people that you'd be hanging out with anyway, go ahead, shoot me an email. We'll try to find a time, a 2-hour block. It's $10 a person, but then obviously you get a sample of each of the beers we have on draft. I think we have 10 beers on draft right now. So it's definitely worth it. And it's a lot of fun. And I hope to see you there. And if you're not able to make it these next 2 weekends, don't worry. We will start doing normal tours really, really soon. Fingers crossed. And if nothing else, grab a sled or something and get outside and enjoy this several inches of snow that we got. And remember, spring is like right around the corner. My Bock is already in the tank. That's the beer of spring, so there is light at the end of the tunnel. Until then, Prost, and maybe if you looking for something to do the next 2 weekends, shoot me an email. Love to show you our brewery. Cheers.